Sounds good. All right. Yeah, we'll get started. Hopefully, Julius can join us shortly. All right, but we can call the meeting to order. So welcome to the January 9th, 2025 electronic meeting of the Greenbelt Advisory Commission. This meeting is being held electronically, so we intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. Please note that if you are watching this meeting live online, there will be a 30-second delay. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 1-877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID number 941-0420-8673. Again, that number to call is 1-877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID number 941-0420-8673. This information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN, channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at a2gov.org/watchctn. Please note that if you call in for public comment, you must enter *6 to unmute yourself. All right, next on our agenda is roll call. And when you please reply with here and where you are joining us from. So let's see, Commissioner Armstrong.
I'm here, I'm not here, but I am joining the meeting from Tucson, Arizona.
Thank you. Commissioner Bloomer?
Here from my home in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Boggs?
Here from my home in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Buzzard?
I'm here calling in from Ypsilanti.
Great. Commissioner Johnson?
Here from my home in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Laramie?
Here from my home in Ypsilanti.
Councilperson Malik?
Here, calling in from Ann Arbor's 2nd Ward.
Commissioner Schuler?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Great. And Commissioner Riggs here from my home in Ann Arbor. Good. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome. Glad to see you, familiar faces and a new face. So welcome to Councilperson Malik. So we have quorum. Excellent. And then moving on to approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda for today? Commissioner Boggs, and is there a second? I saw Commissioner Bloomer. So all in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, the motion is approved. And then approval of minutes. And that was included in your meeting packet that we received. And that was for November 7th, 2024. And let's just take a moment to take a look at those minutes if you haven't had a chance to. Is that enough time? Okay, all right. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes? I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson, great. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Nay? Okay, great. Minutes are approved. And then public commentary, we do have time for public commentary now and again later in the meeting. Juliet, could you tell us, is anybody waiting to address the commission?
We have no callers for public commentary.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to number 6 on our agenda is presentations. And Rosie, you are up.
All right. Hi, everybody. Well, the very first thing is the most important. Welcome to our new council member appointment, John Malik, who was recently voted into City Council at the last election for Ward 2. John is a major policy advisor at the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And John will say a few words about himself, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Rosie, and thank you, everybody, for the strong welcome. So, as Rosie said, my job today is both with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and now also with the Ann Arbor City Council. I come to you with, I guess, a strong background, one might call it, in agriculture and land management. I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. Had no real intention of ever going into anything agriculture, probably ever again after that. Not that it was a bad experience or anything, but just wasn't necessarily where I saw my career going. But here I am today. In the intervening time, I served in the U.S. Peace Corps as a sustainable agriculture volunteer. I volunteered with AmeriCorps doing wildlife and wilderness restoration in Nevada. And then I worked for a few years with USDA, working in international agricultural trade policy. And now today with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development as the policy director. At MDART, I work on a variety of things related to climate, related to federal policy, related to agriculture. And then finally, I've actually been looking into lately a lot of topics related to land access, beginning farmer access, land conservation, and things like that. So very excited to join the Greenbelt Advisory Commission because of that. So I'm excited to contribute, and I look forward to getting to know all of you guys and working on this really great project and really great topic with all of you. So thanks, Rosie.
Thank you, Councilmember Malik. As you can tell, we are so lucky to have somebody who knows so much about the issues that we work on here and more. So thank you. All right, more report. The WEMU's Issues of the Environment segment, which picked up the Greenbelt about 2 years ago, picked up Legacy Land Conservancy recently. You can go listen to that online, talking about their RCPP, of which we are a part. So that got some nice press recently. And projects, the end of the year is always historically one of our busiest times in real estate. And so we had several closings that were smushed in before January 1st. So we closed on our Divine project. So this is a conservation easement that we now hold. This is a 20-acre forested property, lots of vernal pools, immediately adjacent to, owned by the same person as another conservation easement that we hold, the Divine Caselka easement, which is then next to the Washtenaw County's Divine Preserve. Really great property. Again, private property, closed to the public, but preserved forever. So we're really, really happy to have that finished. And then one of our partner projects, DeForest Salem, closed. This is Washtenaw County's conservation easement. This was just a farm in Salem Township, hence the name Salem, adjacent to a couple other conservation easements. That was ASAP Ale funded. A good job, them. And that's a big one. That is, I forget how large, but much larger than 20 acres. And then closing tomorrow, so not quite the end of the year, couldn't sneak it in, is Webster Township's Heller project, another conservation easement with lots of money in it, county money, federal money, city money, Webster Township money. MDARD money, I believe, is part of this one as well. So really, really got that leveraging going on. But this has a lovely forest on it, really, really healthy forest, as well as regular farmland up in the front. And this is at the corner of the Greenbelt, 70 acres. So working hard. And that's my staff update.
Congratulations. That is fantastic. I know you're really trying to get Heller in by the end of 2024, but close enough.
Yeah. And then if I may, on to budget update. To go into more detail for those who are new. So these are projects listed here that have been approved by City Council. We have more in closed session budget that either GAC has reviewed and recommended but hasn't made it to City Council yet, or that GAC is still considering in various different ways. So these are approved by City Council. So we have our fund balance of 5.7 million-ish. So that is as of last September. Our finances for the end of December have not come out yet. So DeForest and Divine have obviously closed, but are not we're not reflected in the fund balance. So those are still there. And then Heller closing tomorrow, and Fletcher is still sitting out there. So that is obviously not closed in quarter 2 of fiscal year 2025. I'm sure that will close this calendar year instead. So the lead on this spreadsheet, lead agency is who will hold the easement, then the project name, where it is, acres, and what we pay is listed under council approved funds. So you can see we leverage a lot of money on each of these projects. We contribute just a relatively small portion. So we have so many good partners. So after GAC fund balance, there's unrestricted funds, other calculations. GAC pipeline of potential projects is what's kind of going on behind the scenes, and then the last number there is a fund balance less those things going on in the background. And so we have 3.7 million of that at the moment. I know there's a lot to squeeze in right there. Any questions on this? The project that you all approved contribution to at the November meeting still hasn't gone to council yet, so that is reflected in the closed session budget that we will not be reviewing today because we do not have closed session.
Yeah, does anybody second call for questions? No. All right. Thank you, Rosie.
Okay. Then on we go to our one and only real agenda item today. So I don't expect any action on this today, despite maybe what I said last time, but I think it's important to have one more discussion on this. Thank you all so much for sending me your scores, those spreadsheets. I'm sorry if the instructions weren't always clear, but everybody got through it, and it is so helpful to have everybody's perspective on this. I cannot communicate that enough. Small sample size did not give me the whole picture of how we all were thinking. So thank you very much again for that extra work. So to review the background of why we are doing scoring and what the scoring is, we're talking about the scoring system that applies to our regular projects like the ones I had just talked about. When we receive a property for consideration, we take it through this scoring system, and the score helps GAC with the decision. It is a tool in the decision-making process of how much to recommend that we contribute and whether we contribute, and what is the value of this property to the goals of the Greenbelt. So the reason we are changing this is the scoring categories used to be embedded in our Chapter 42 ordinance that runs the Greenbelt, that regulates the Greenbelt. And we went through some major ordinance changes earlier in 2024, which included changing that scoring section to remove the very specific categories that were in there, and instead leave it up to a system approved by GAC. And that was important because there were some categories that were really no longer applicable or relevant, that were very much about getting the Greenbelt started, that aren't as relevant 20 years into it. And I would say, in general, it's good to reevaluate these systems. Lots of programs evaluate their systems based on changing conditions, based on changing goals and priorities. So that's what we have been working on and why we are doing this. So this has been going on for a long time in various ways. There was a scoring committee pre-COVID that kind of worked on it. And that was before our ordinance was changed. So that ordinance change really kicked it off again. But a lot of those changes have carried over, or a lot of those proposed changes from the committee have carried over. We all talk about it occasionally. So really been working on this process in detail the last 3 or 4 months. So we're at the end now of you participated in this scoring activity. You're going to have essentially one more opportunity to review it, and then it will be in February. We will approve it. So today, I'm going to show you the score spreads. We'll start with agriculture, then we'll go to open space. Unnamed, your names are removed, but able to see how all of your colleagues valued each category. I'm going to go through each one, and there will be an opportunity for discussion on each one. I really encourage any and all discussion, argument, convincing, like whatever you want to say. I really encourage you to say it and discuss it as if we were, truly around a table discussing it. And if one doesn't warrant discussion, that's totally okay. But I don't want you to leave today wishing you had said something, or at this, like many other times, I'll be like, email me if you have thoughts. And this time, if you have thoughts, I really encourage you to discuss them with your colleagues here today. So I never in this process expected consensus on points, and I don't expect that from conversation. Each of you have your own professional values and expertise, and that gets reflected in the points that get assigned. And I think we can think broadly and cross discipline enough to understand that each category has its advantages and disadvantages, and no matter what the choice that you made is, there is a good argument for that choice. But I do want you all to, see how you all align or don't align. And again, if you feel strongly about something, this is your time to make the case. Do you have a question? Yes, Elizabeth.
Just a point of clarification, Rosie.
Yeah.
With this process, were you looking to the commissioners to provide council to staff on this as opposed to that you'll, take it under consideration and then make a decision as opposed to we are deciding as a group exactly how this is going to work?
Great question. The decision is more in your hands, I suppose, than mine. I am going to take all of your final scores and and I have already run some statistics on them. And so like one possible outcome, I haven't quite decided, is that the final scores would be like the median number of what of your collection of data, the median or the mean or something like that, maybe adjusted slightly, but I'm not making my own decision. It is based on your spreadsheets, your exercises.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Um,
The power.
Yeah, yes, yeah. This is, I want to again say the importance of this. Like you will, every single project that comes after this, and we can always review the scoring again annually, biannually, but this is important. You will see this again, and I want you all to be confident that this accurately, this will accurately reflect the value of a property that comes to you, and that you will feel confident in your recommendation about that property, in part based on this. So, Remy and I also participated in this exercise. So ours are in there as well. Though we do not, as I just said, I'm not trying to lead you in any particular direction. And I'm not going to, but so we're all in there. I might point out a couple of results that I do particularly think warrant discussion, if you all don't prompt it yourself. Okay, so robust discussion time. And then when this is all done, if your minds have changed after this, I will ask that you do the exercise again after this meeting. Send it to me. I will revise and then I'll present the final scoring in February. Are you ready? Any more questions on that preamble? Okay, thank you. Here we go. All right, starting with the agriculture one. So this would apply to properties that are already predominantly in agricultural use. So starting with the type of agricultural land, which was prime or agricultural soils. So here is your spread in no particular order. The highest was 50, the lowest was 12. So that actually had the largest range among all of these data sets, I guess, between 50 and 12.
Rosie, just a question about the way are we seeing all of the table? Are folks able to see that, or is it getting cut off on the bottom?
Oh, at the bottom, I can see everything.
So the bottom row, Rosie, ends at the number 25. And I think that's the correct thing. Yeah, we're not looking to bottom line or below that to average anything. We're just looking at the inputs from the commissioners. And also we have intentionally blacked out the numbers for each column, and we're going to go through them incrementally because looking at them all at once is very distracting, as Rosie and I found out in practice. So that's why you can't see those values.
Mm-hmm. So would anyone like to prompt a discussion on this category based on this spread? Is anything surprising to anybody?
Rosie, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So I'm just thinking about kind of the best way to sort of process this, and would it be kind of correct to say, like, if we just on our own did some quick averaging here. Like if the average number feels like fairly comfortable to us, then that's like a good sign, like a check mark.
That's up to you. I have average data, but I mean the average here is, like in the 20s or so, as is the median. I do have that background information. If you want to think of it that way, and that's helpful to you, feel free to do that. But I don't know if everyone would think that way.
And can I ask a question? So the rate, this is like for the quality of the land that's in agricultural and how good it is. And somebody scored it. I'm trying to see. Yeah, I guess the lowest score, there are two kind of low scores, 18 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anyone to give themselves away.
Mm-hmm.
But can Rosie, can you maybe help me? Why would you not want a better score than those things?
It's possible that, there was more even distribution of points for
Okay.
those folks across all of this, thinking that they're just more equal.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be why, I think.
Okay.
Not to get too heady about it, but another argument could be that, our conservation easement acquisitions are acquiring perpetual interests. And so to look at the current condition of the soils in just a snapshot in time maybe doesn't do it justice for what the property could be in the future after 200 years of regenerative agriculture and soil building. Maybe those soils can be improved. That said, that's a very generous assumption that ag is going to trend in that direction and the property is going to be stewarded in that way. And, takes like 500 years to create an inch of topsoil. So we are in the business of forever, but forever is a really long time. So already very productive and very high quality soils is an asset in the here and now.
Or almost the flip side of that is that the measurement of prime agricultural soils, I believe, is based entirely on soil type and not anything about like organic matter or how much topsoil there is. So in that way, it doesn't reflect management and the true capability of what soil could be or should be. I've had farmers in the past, say we should be testing soil, which we're not going to do. But there are people that think that that's much more important.
It's a great point. You're all staring at quantitative inputs that prompt a qualitative discussion here. So if you feel strongly about why a score is or is the way you think it should be or is not the way you think it should be, that's just, we're giving you a space to have that discussion, and all opinions are welcome.
Yes.
I guess I'm just trying to process the process that Rosie you just laid out. And I'm thinking about the number of categories for ag and then open space that we are going to be taking through this process.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure how long you were expecting to meet today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. So now that I'm thinking about this process and if we're going to be having qualitative discussions about these numbers, it's going to be pretty lengthy. So I just wanted to set that out there and make sure we're on the same page. And then I'm wondering if it would be helpful or what other commissioners think if we were able to see across all of these categories for the agricultural piece, because what I can't discern from looking at this first category of type of land is, someone, yeah, because we had 200 points to play with, and so I think there could be value in seeing how people were feeling about the other categories. And that just might be me. And I'm fine if we really do just want to go category by category. But my main point is recognizing the time that it's going to take for us to do this.
Yep. The time doesn't bother me. We obviously need to end the meeting, but at some point. But like I said, this is important, and I don't want while you all are focused on the meeting and here together to give this the time that it deserves, whatever that time may be. And we don't have to have a discussion on every single one if no discussion is really needed. So if it gets lengthy and we need to do it again in February, that's fine with me. And I can change this format so you see all of the things as you are requesting, as well as the mean and median, if you all would prefer that. And I can just give you a minute to kind of look at it.
Can I have
go ahead, Sheila.
just a follow-up related to Kate? What you brought up earlier, and combined with what you're saying about the process and the length of the time. Kate mentioned if we're happy with the median, then we're okay with it. But my guess is we're going to have a spread on each one, and maybe we won't have a spread on each one. And I worry then you end up with the average. If this is the process we're going to use, and you end up with the average for each one, they all start to have equal weight. And I think the conversation becomes interesting when, and I hadn't thought of asking, why would someone do a 12, or why would someone, for understanding what's the pro and what's the con argument for each one. Like, why should this be low? Why should this be high? And if people are okay with whether they identify with a particular number or not, but at least making an argument, this should be low, this should be high, the stuff that just came up helped me think, well, maybe I should have put mine lower than I did. So yes. I guess I'm worried about turning it into a quantitative, that this is going to become an average, because I think then it makes everyone a little bit, or every one of the categories a little bit meaningless if they all turn into around the middle of a spread. And instead that we as a group say, these are the top 3, these are the top 4, or so, I don't know if there has to be consensus, but some feeling of why this particular category is important or not. And we read the stuff in the sheet, but I think there's going to be more that comes out with people's knowledge of what each one means. So that's just a thought on the process. I don't know if that makes it longer, Elizabeth, and that's a problematic, or it's just a different approach to it.
Yeah, and one, I guess, additional thought to piggybacks nicely off what Sheila just shared is, I'm a little bit of a numbers person, so I'm going to come up with another number. But the way that I thought about this was with 200 points to play with and 14 categories. That means every category, if they're totally even, gets around 14.3 points. So I'm sure we all had our own process of going through this, but I thought about it as do I think a category deserves more or less than 14? Because it has to add up to 200. So, looking at these numbers here, personally, I'm a little surprised by the 50, because that means you only have 8 50s that you can apply, right? You only have 4 50s that you can apply out of 200 points. But if somebody else wasn't, gave some category 0, I didn't even think that was an option. So anyway, I guess as I'm looking at these numbers, maybe that is a better way for me to think about it. To Sheila's point, rather than an average, is how much higher or lower than 14 and change are all of these numbers, if the goal is 200 points.
Bentley? Yeah, Kate, you got on the thread that I was gonna bring up, where I kind of looked at it as, I know we removed some categories and things like that. But I kind of looked at it as, I really looked at the percentage of the total points as well, and kind of looking at the old, or at the current scoring character categories, and kind of going from there and being okay, this is how we do it now. Do I think this should be emphasized more or less going forward, or about the same? And so then I played with my points in that way of like, okay, I'm going to plus up certain things a little bit, but keeping in mind, especially being someone new, keeping in mind what we had before, and the kind of general mix, and understanding, the reputation of having a pretty good track record, and not wanting to go crazy off of that. So like in the past, I know this type of agricultural land was 8.5%, of the total points is my understanding. And so this would be, the average, based on what I understand, the average of knowing that when you get rid of categories, it's going to mess with the numbers, but an average of this spread would be quite a bit higher percentage of the total points, if I'm not mistaken. Which I think for the type of agricultural land, it makes sense to me that would be the case based on the goals, that I've been hearing, and the values of this category. But I say that all to say, I like the idea of thinking about it. I don't necessarily, I can see how if you put all the numbers in the grid, it also becomes meaningless. But I do think it is helpful to have like, here's what, I think hearing the arguments is really important. And then thinking about it, it helps me to think about it as, okay, percentage of the total points, here's where we're at, kind of, do we need to adjust that? And do people feel like they need to adjust their scoring based on that?
So what I'll offer is placing this conversation in the context of what's to come in the future is, regardless of how long this conversation takes place. Again, you've gone through a quantitative exercise. Now it's time for a qualitative discussion. We did not mean to indicate through the quantitative exercise that we were just going to bottom line average these inputs and just that's the new scoring system. We were always going to supplement what was offered to us with a qualitative discussion. And then it's staff's responsibility to reconcile the two data sets, one qualitative, one quantitative, and then come back to you with here's what you said in numbers, here's what was discussed at these meetings. And now staff have found the balance between those two things and is presenting you with a scoring system that takes both into account and up for consideration and adoption by you all. So just because the average score is 18 in a category, it may, after this discussion, based on what Rosie and I take away, we may go, you know what, everyone seemed that there was a general nodding of heads that was sort of a tier 1 category. And maybe we need to up that to 25 to balance that out. And now we're going to go over to the next one. And actually that seemed like a tier 3 category, and it's going to be one of the lower weighted criteria. So it wasn't as simple as just the quantitative exercise, and it is worthwhile for us to have these discussions. So we're all on the same page as a commission moving forward as to what these really mean to us. When we go into closed session and you hear what the scores are for each of these, you know what value and conversations have been tied to those categories as we're looking at each individual parcel. Does that make sense?
Definitely makes sense to me, and is comforting, and yeah, ready to get into that good old qualitative stuff.
And going back to what Rosie said, honestly, if it's a category and you just go, you know what, no one has anything to say about groundwater recharge and we just got to move on. Let's keep it under 2 minutes. If we can keep some of these categories to under 5 minutes, maybe we get through ag today and then open spaces for another meeting. But I appreciate any and all discussion that you want to have, and we don't need a score. We've had this scoring system for 20 years. We don't need this done by February. It's nice to have. I don't want these conversations to take too long, but it's a good learning experience for everyone here. Okay. What is behind door number parcel size? And actually, before we enter into that, Rosie and I in practice found it overwhelming to see all of the scores laid out all at once. If there is a general nodding of heads that you would like to see that visual, I think Rosie can pull that up. How do you all feel?
Question about that. Did you scramble all of the numbers, or is any given row a particular person?
Any given row is a particular person.
Okay. So I
Hopefully
think
you
in
can
that
identify
case,
yourself.
it might be useful to see them all, only because then you can sort of get a sense for somebody's thought process and like where all their scores went. If it was entirely scrambled, then I think it's just numbers.
Okay. Rosie, can you do that?
Yes, I can. I'm going to go into Excel now, though. Okay. Some notable ones that I definitely thought warranted discussion are the ones where people said we shouldn't. Multiple people said we should 86 these categories, which was not surprising, which is conservation programs and significant cultural value.
Just to clarify, is removing a category still on the table?
Yes.
And then do we still want to go kind of like trying to keep it tight, but go category by category? So are we on parcel size now?
It's sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I would love to hear sort of anyone who wanted to volunteer for each one. Like, here's my reason I chose a really high score, and somebody else's, here's my reason why I chose a low score. If that's comfortable for people to admit, it might be an interesting way to go through. Or if anybody else has those comments.
I will jump in just from my time working in this field. I find this one is always really difficult to grapple with because those secondary benefits, some of the stories and the significant cultural value conversations all often intersect with parcels that sometimes just aren't as big. But from a programmatic standpoint, with a mission to deliver as much protected land within the Greenbelt within a 30-year time frame, we've said this a lot over the years, but for the newer commissioners, I think it's helpful to understand it is all the same paperwork, all the same staff time to protect 25 acres as it is to protect 250 acres. It's a different cost. We're paying a lot more money for that 250 acres, but all the due diligence, all the staff time, all the attorney review, all the partner organizing generally kind of stays the same if it's 25 versus 250. So with less than 10 years to go before the millage expires, there's a certain amount of bang for your buck by prioritizing picking off larger pieces than smaller pieces. I can say that was the original vision of, I think the Greenbelt was trying to get bigger chunks, build bigger blocks as quick as you can before it's gone. And then in the middle, we started to work on some mid-size properties and lower. And yeah, so in general, there's a bang for your buck value.
I'll continue on that line. I was high for both of these first two categories. They were both my highest in the ag space, and because I don't think that they should be even all the way across. I think that these two categories make, looking across all of them, if I think like what is the basic level thing that sets ag land apart, it felt like these two were it. Um, that being said, I feel like I'm often a proponent of figuring out how to protect and um, use smaller parcels, because I do think that there's a lot of um, value when we start to think about, like Remy said, cultural significance, but also ways of like finding tangible ways of supporting new and beginning or disadvantaged farmers. Um, and so I guess I just say that to say out loud, I think that that is really important, but I think that it is a uh, maybe a different conversation of how we do that, if that is something that we want to do, which I think that it is.
Yeah, and I would say it kind of looks like these first two are really popping. Like even though there's big ranges for our group, it seems pretty clear that they're kind of the two. There's an emphasis on these first two categories, and yeah, Remy, I like what you said about bang for your buck in terms of staff time, and I even thought um, I was kind of in the middle to high on this one. But I even thought that I was going to be quite high, and there were still scores higher than mine, even if just maybe a couple.
Yeah, and I guess I can speak to the low end. I scored both of these low, although the point you just made about parcel size, Remy, I'm open to reviewing all of my scores, but particularly that one, I think that makes a lot of sense as far as 10 years left on the millage and bang for your buck. But I came at all of these questions from a water quality perspective. Surprise, surprise. Just given my work. So, I tended to score, groundwater recharge, natural features, contains riparian area higher, which just ended up resulting in some of these other categories being scored lower because of that spread, just getting the 200 points to fit. That doesn't mean that I didn't think a lot about, the value of like the type of the agricultural land, the parcel size, the road frontage. But I just came at, like, full disclosure, I came at both of these categories from that like groundwater, riparian, water buffer kind of perspective, given land protection is like the primary way of protecting water quality in our region. So I could certainly be swayed to move things around, but just the way that I ended up shaking things out, I was one of the more even scorers across most of these.
Okay, helpful. Next one.
Rosie, I wonder, do you have underneath the mean and median, do you have some measure of variance or spread?
Yes, I have range.
Perfect. I think that would help. Just now we know which ones are the ones to maybe talk more about.
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can help with that if you'd like. Why is this doing this? I don't know. Oh, here we go. So yes, that first one was the one with the biggest spread, followed by parcel size. Those were the spreads that I was indeed not concerned about, but wanted to point out. So I'm glad we started with those. Yeah, if you want to jump around, this is the one I really want to talk about with the zeros.
I would talk about that. I think that I thought about it if operators are using a lot of cover crops, and when you think about regenerative agriculture, I think conservation programs are extremely important. But on the flip side of that, it really is an indication of the operator. So if you preserve a farm and then it's sold to somebody who doesn't practice conservation programs, you sort of lost that. But I still think that, filter strips and cover crops, all of that is so important to the health of the soil. So I probably scored it on the higher end of that just from that standpoint, but also recognizing that that could change with a different operator.
This is Dee, and thanks for that, Roseanne. Conservation reserve programs, sometimes when the part of the agricultural field is out of rotation at the time, it becomes temporarily a great habitat for certain things, not everything. And so I don't think I gave it a super high rating, but I did give it modestly high. So
I think Roseanne captured the constant push and pull with this category of we all want these things. I think on ag properties, and our constituents do, but the tool that we use doesn't guarantee the conservation easement, doesn't say anything about any existing conservation programs continuing. There is no guarantee they will continue in a perpetual format. Yeah, so there are always folks who think this is really important, and always folks who think it doesn't apply to easements.
Yeah, and I'll speak to my score there. I had a pretty low score on that one, and I think it was more of a lack of understanding of the nuance of that, or even more than the nuance, the actual what the category was referring to. And I sort of read it as like, okay, well, if there's already conservation on it, aren't we redundant? And that's clearly a misunderstanding of the category. So I would, as I adjust some of my scores, that would be one I would adjust higher than where I was.
Go ahead, Kate.
I scored this one like right in the middle. But on particularly, Roseanne, hearing your perspective, I didn't realize that we were still that an option was still potentially to get rid of a category, and I'm certainly interested in someone else's perspective to convince me otherwise. But right now, I'm kind of feeling like I'd like to apply my 12 points maybe somewhere else. If this category didn't exist. I mean, to your point, Rosie, like we have talked a lot about as a group about the pitfalls of applying and like the ineffective nature of applying like management restrictions to easements. And I think if that's going to be, if that's a perspective that we're working with, I mean, if the land is protected, positive management decisions could be made. If it's not protected and it's developed, those options disappear. I also feel like we have a lot of discussion often about like we'll get a score and then we'll still discuss, options, whether we want to move it forward or not. And maybe some of those more qualitative questions about how the land is currently being managed and that sort of thing could fall into that part of the discussion after the scoring's been done.
Yeah, if I just would like to follow up on what Kate was saying, because my scoring reflects the comments that Rosie and Kate were just pointing out, in that I actually was one of the zeros here because I felt like there were other categories that were more deserving of my points. And as supportive as I am of regenerative agriculture and all these different conservation programs, I also wouldn't want to see a great ag property not considered because there's not a program. I feel like this, the fact that Greenbelt can offer another mechanism to demonstrate wanting to preserve ag, and then, as was mentioned earlier, then I could see it being a way to then possibly work with the property owner to look at these other conservation program options and techniques. But as far as, so I just thought I would share my thinking on why a 0 for this one for me.
And so this operates like a good ping pong match. I'm gonna put the pitch. I'm gonna put the pitch for the. Yeah, I think it's good. Go back and forth and thinking about it. I think I was the 25, and maybe it makes sense for, again, Kate comes with the view of the watershed. I come from the biology, and this watershed issue we had discussed in various times about is there a way to account for current management practices on the land in our process? And this seems like the one category that does allow us to do that, totally understanding that it is definitely not in perpetuity. You have no control over whether that will continue. But if I think of this from a landscape scale and from the mission of the Greenbelt, and even the politics of supporting the Greenbelt, this means that if you have a choice, it's not going to exclude, certainly shouldn't exclude farms that don't have conservation programs. So it shouldn't be an either or be so highly rated that another farm is not going to get it. But if we have choices among parcels, if the balance is towards parcels that currently have stronger land management, we have a larger landscape impact. We also have an impact that is visible in terms of what kinds of land the Greenbelt is protecting and what people see as the future of agriculture. So that more from a motivation standpoint, I think it could be really cool to see more and more parcels that are part of the Greenbelt that are also doing these conservation programs. So I put it high to drag the average up, not because I think it should be that high, but I think dropping it entirely, you lose some of those benefits I just mentioned.
Good arguments. Yeah, that was compelling to me. I wanted to clarify, this was a where there was a proposed change to split natural features into natural features and conservation programs, right? Because they were together before.
Yes. Yes, that is what happened. They're there. Where is the conservation program?
It was in the.
Oh yeah, exactly. It was just natural features, or the category title was natural features, but it included government programs and natural features, precisely. Yeah, so this got more specific. Mm-hmm. Okay, healthy discussion. Going to have you jump to this one. Significant cultural value. So this, based on Bentley's question, this was attempting to replace and upgrade scenic/historic value, which previously said broad sweeping views or has a historic building on it, and it had low points at the time too. So instead of just continuing with that or nixing it, attempted to redefine it as some really big, important cultural thing that is undefined at this point, but that would be rare, but significant. And comes with similar challenges, I think, to the conservation program question of all of these ideas that I have personally that could fit into significant cultural value are unlikely to be explicitly protected by a conservation easement. But at least the land is there.
I can start the ping pong because I'm another boring mid. This is another one of my boring mid scores. I was 12. I feel like I could be swayed in one way or another. I guess I thought about this. So the examples in the spreadsheet we looked at were like Underground Railroad location, importance to Indigenous people, Centennial Farm. Those I feel like are really unique examples that I feel like we should take into consideration. So that's why I went with 12 rather than like 5. But then on the other hand, I could also see, like, I feel like I also sort of thought of this category as like agricultural heritage, like the culture of a community. And to that end, like that way of thinking could be factored into the existing categories of adjacent land use or proximity to protected land. So, like this idea that we've talked about that farms next to one another, there's benefit in that because it creates this culture and also preserves like the heritage of Southeast Michigan being very agricultural. So if I'm thinking about it that way, then I could be convinced to lower that score and maybe move it towards some of those other categories. But I think I was thinking a little bit higher because the examples in the spreadsheet were very, I think would be very important to consider. But I guess to my point also about those additional qualitative things we take into account after we see the scoring for a property, I could also see this being one of those where a property scores mid-level or higher, and then we talk about, do we want to move forward with it? Oh, and then there's this added, very cool historic value that the community cares about. Like, I think community input is important. So some thoughts.
I don't think this matched with what I put originally. I'm changing my mind now. The worry about quantifying cultural value and putting it as a score. Again, I'm thinking about this politically and long term and what does this mean? And who's deciding what's culturally valuable? There's big, I don't know. I feel power dynamics are in play here in a way that's a little problematic. And I prefer what Kate just described. What if it's not part of the scoring and instead of something we discuss and we bring up and maybe it influences choosing one property over another, but to try and put a value on it feels artificial, whereas something like conservation programs, they either have them or they don't, or how many do they have? Many of these others can be quantified. I would worry about trying to be accountable to an argument that you've made a quantifiable decision here.
Not all of us here, but a good number of us have been in closed session on review of applications. We know that we use the scoring system to help understand what's in front of us, but it's not the only feature of our discussions. And staff are able to prepare supplemental memos or slides that talk about things like potential stated cultural value from the landowner or from other partner organizations that we've talked to, contextualizing as that's just what's come to the table. We may be missing something about this property. We may be capturing everything that we are aware of. But again, it's a qualitative part of the discussion. Similarly, maybe conservation programs is in that category of something that we're reporting on, we're talking about. But I think one of the major critiques on the conservation movement to date in the US, or that has been highlighted over the last decade in particular, is I think the original view of the programs was to be hyper objective on the resource concerns alone and ignore a lot of times the cultural value that's at play. But I think by including it in our discussions, there's value, but putting a number on it is too fraught. As you said, Sheila, I like that. And so I want to keep it as part of our discussions, no doubt, but for me, this is one that we could remove and take on a case-by-case basis as it relates to staff's reporting on closed session applications. Similarly, conservation value for me scored low for that same reason, or conservation programs, because getting back to the core of the work, permanent land protection surrounding the city of Ann Arbor, our conservation easements are legally based on an idea of conservation value. What are the natural resources that are being perpetually protected by this legal tool? And a lot of these categories are what help define the legal conservation value of a property we're protecting. And some of them that are, and to go back to the very first category of agricultural land type, that's exactly why we state that these properties contain 95% prime soils or prime if drained soils, because those can't be recreated. Those are what they are, and there's no amount of regenerative ag that can recreate a prime ag soil. So I'm in support of a twofold system that we all acknowledge is it creates a holistic view at any application, but not necessarily embedding it within our scoring system.
I'm quite persuaded by that. Certain cultural values can be in conservation values. I have seen it rally, but that is not primarily what we do at this time. But I'm very persuaded by those arguments. And I would propose at this point getting rid of this category. Does anybody want to argue against that?
I agree. I think the points that Sheila and Remy made were very pertinent. I would agree with getting rid of it.
Clarifying question. Right now, so we're you had previously proposed redefining scenic or historical value now as significant cultural value.
Mm-hmm.
But previously the measurement was like the number of features. So like just the more number of features that could be in the scenic and or historical value, like the higher the number of those, then the better the score. Is that how it was measured?
Yes.
So it wasn't even, but then the qualitative discussion would happen in closed session and things like that. But it would influence in terms of just the sheer, like if there were several things on one site, then that would boost its score a little bit. To me, then that does make sense that you could eliminate it or have it be quite low, because it's like one cultural value we could determine that's way more important than 5 of these other features in the same.
And there's the opportunity, I think road frontage as a category used to somewhat represent the threat that existed for dividing up a parcel that was larger, because so much road frontage meant you could get so many parcels subdivided. And yet, ever since I've interacted with road frontage, that's not how I've really thought about it. I've thought about it as a publicly accessible view of a view shed of protected land. So scenic view and road frontage kind of could go hand in hand if we start to think about some of these categories a little bit differently than maybe the original, development of the first Greenbelt scoring system did. So while we're potentially zeroing out or removing this column as a category, some of its essence can still exist elsewhere that isn't concerning to tie a value to, if that makes sense.
when we are scoring parcels and the cultural value becomes where is that coming from? Is that coming from research that you were doing, Rosie? Is that something that the person bringing the parcel brings up to you? Where is that normally coming from?
The original scenic historic value category. Scenic was about me looking at Google Maps and seeing how much of the farm you could see, and that was kind of the scenic, and the historic would be either self-reported or doing some research on the buildings of the property and seeing when they were built. If they were a certain age, then they would have gotten points for that type, being that type of historic. So both. And for significant cultural value, I mean, you know, I just made that up. So I think I would have thought that as self-reported, mainly.
Without, like, if we get rid of that category, will there be no longer kind of a requirement to score it? Then will the self-reporting and the research into the cultural value and the historic value of it go down?
On our application, on the Greenbelt application, there's a lot of space for anybody to write anything, to provide us any information that they might want to provide about their property that's important to them. So that's often where it would get self-reported, and they can continue doing that. I wouldn't, unless I already thought or somebody pointed out to me that there was maybe something significant about it, I probably wouldn't do significant research.
Yeah. And if it's not showing up in the application, it's often something that might come up in the first walkthrough with the landowner on the site. So there are a couple opportunities for them to self-report and relay those kinds of that kind of information to us.
I have to hop off in the next 5 or 10 minutes. I think I would like to come back to this category. I'm having I don't know what I scored it, but I don't think I want to get rid of this category. My initial feelings or thoughts through just this part of the conversation is, if I have a piece of land and I'm trying to apply to a government application and it doesn't talk about the cultural significance, I'm going to send everything that I say or put in it towards the things that it does emphasize. And while I get the argument that it's hard, like it can be hard in the future to, you know, sort of like political piece of like deciding what is culturally valuable or not. I think that it just feels like a step backwards to me for us to get rid of it completely and not keep that out. But I can put some more thought into that and come back with a little bit more.
Just to be clear, I think can we say it's definitely not that we're getting rid of it, but whether we quantify it, whether it goes into the scoring, is that a fair thing to say, that the other items not in the scoring can be as important? They're just not, we don't put a number value to it. Is that a fair way to say that we move forward?
You all through a collective nodding of heads can require that separate from a quantified number or score in the scoring system, that Rosie and I are working to put together any necessary supplemental information that helps you in your deliberations.
So you'll have like a quantitative, this is what it's scored at, and then we'd have a list of this qualitative item and a little description, and this qualitative item and a little description. And it's a required thing for us to see, but it's not within the scoring system. Could we do something like that?
And then we will figure out whether we need to put that opportunity to relay that information in the application, or if we're developing a standardized questionnaire for the first site visit to walk through with property owners so that we're capturing this information. We figure out how to get the information that you all feel is prudent to the discussion, and then report on that. Whether it's always comprehensive that's one of the trickier parts of a conversation like this in particular. Wait, heard, Julius, understood. We can flag it as something to revisit. With the time we have, I'll just say, to Elizabeth's earlier point, maybe we are only going to achieve reviewing the ag scoring today, and that's perfectly fine. Is that where everyone's feeling most comfortable, is concluding on that and not going into open space?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you all like to finish this conversation or end with agriculture, or would you like to end at 5:30 and think about it some more? I was trying to push this through fast because I think I thought that was what was demanded of me, just kind of making sure things keep moving. But if we're okay with taking more time with it, I really value your GAC's ownership of this particular set of details.
I think the fact that, as we clarified at the beginning of this item, that it is less that we are advising staff and we actually are making decisions as a commission. I think it's, I probably speak for everybody, that we are going to be deliberate and thoughtful and want to be sure that we are doing so. Yes, balancing, moving forward, making progress so that for most of this year, the staff will have that information to work from. But also that we do want to make sure that, we've got a solid reasoning behind what we're putting out there.
Yeah, I would agree with Elizabeth. I think just based on what the few things we've discussed today, I already want to change some of my scoring. I anticipate probably something similar happening, at least for some of us, for the open space scoring. So, obviously you have your own, staff have their timeline, and I totally respect that. But I think maybe something for us to think about is if we push open space, which looks like we will with the time, to our next meeting, we might also not have decisions by that meeting, right? Like we might need some deliberative time for the open space discussion. Our strength is that we all have very different areas of expertise, and I've really valued just hearing different people's perspectives, even though we haven't talked about every single category.
Okay. We can end it there for today. Staff have no timeline, truly. It's all self-imposed. So we'll just continue this a little bit every meeting until we get there. I was really happy with this discussion once it got going. Exactly what I was looking for. Thank you all. I recommend that you write down how your thoughts have changed right after this meeting, so you don't forget. You don't have to send me anything at this point, but document it for yourself. And we can finish agriculture next time.
To that point, Rosie, this is a little off topic, but I did notice, and apologies if I missed this because I was out for a few weeks, but all of our upcoming meetings were scheduled Sorry, my house just got very loud. All of our upcoming meetings were scheduled for an hour, from 4 to 5. I was wondering if we could update those just to be a little longer. My calendar is a scary place, so I'm just afraid something might get scheduled on top of it if we're expecting these to be more like our standard hour and a half or maybe more.
Yes.
Actually, just a correction on that. So it was just today's meeting that was from 4 to 5, and then February 6th and out there for 2 hours from 4 to 6. So hopefully that's what everybody has. I think that's what we received. Is Kate, is that what you're seeing?
Yes. Yeah, it is. Thanks for that clarification, Elizabeth.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe just picking up then, if we're done with that agenda item. Thank you so much, Rosie, for pulling this together. And
yeah, thank you all. And I know that's a lot of this is a lot of details for GAC, and we usually don't pull you into a lot of details. There are a lot of things that GAC does not have sway over, in day-to-day operations. But this scoring system, I think, mostly belongs to you, the commission. That is, kind of what our ordinance says now, a system approved by GAC. And I think it's also valuable to have the majority of this discussion, or have a good amount of discussion in a public facing way, so that the public can see it happening, since we took it away from the ordinance. So thank you. I'm done.
Sounds good. So if there aren't any other comments or questions from commissioners, I'll move on to our next item. Okay. Which actually is public commentary. So we do have an opportunity to hear from the public again. Juliet, anyone waiting to address the commission?
No, we have no public commentary callers.
All right, well, thank you. Maybe folks will get a chance to watch this on CTN and know to tune in for the next meeting or two to hear us discuss scoring. Okay, well then the final item on our agenda is adjournment. So could I get a motion to adjourn our meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Oh, okay, Commissioner Armstrong, seconded by Boggs. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay. That was approved. Motion carries, and we are adjourned. So thank you, everybody. Stay warm.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good discussion.